Hi, today we're going to learn how to use VPN to stay secure and private online. Wow, this is a tough job. Just kidding. When you use NordVPN, all it takes is just a single click. See for yourself. Click, and you're browsing securely on public Wi-Fi. Click, your ISP can't see what you do online. Click, and you're in a different country. Well, virtually. Any device you have there, NordVPN has you covered. Everything else is just details. But if you care to know more, NordVPN has more than 5,000 servers all over the world. It protects your sensitive data with advanced encryption, shields you from malware and phishing sites, and keeps no logs of your online activity.
Click link in the description and get 68% discount for your first order. Restoring and polishing wood surfaces. Rub the lacquer with coarse or medium grit micro mesh. Examine your lacquered surface and look for any obvious blemishes or scratches. If the surface is covered with pretty obvious marks, use a piece of 2000 grit or so micro mesh to buff the surface. Work in short, vertical movements, keeping the micro mesh moving in the same direction as you go. You can purchase micro mesh online or in a hardware or home improvement store. You can also use finishing paper to get rid of scratches and blemishes. Place a cork sanding block on top of the micro mesh sheet to make the sanding process easier. Switch to a finer grit to continue smoothing out the surface. Grab a piece of micro mesh that's around 4000 grit or so. As you did before, rub down the lacquer in short, vertical motions. After rubbing the entire surface, continue switching to a higher grit, like 6000. Keep alternating your micro mesh sheets and rubbing the surface of the lacquer until the scratches and blemishes are barely visible. Using different grits helps make your polishing job look more even. Buff the surface with a very fine grit micro mesh. Choose a smooth 12,000 or so grit sheet and rub in short, vertical strokes along the surface of your lacquer. Try to buff away any remaining marks or scratches so the lacquer can look as smooth and flawless as possible. Touch the surface to check for any blemishes. Look for obvious scratches and marks that you can detect with your fingertips. Additionally, examine the lacquer to make sure that it's completely smooth and reflective. You don't want there to be any visible scratches once you apply the polish. Buffing and waxing car exteriors. Install a correcting foam polishing pad into a mechanical polisher. Search online or in an auto supply shop for a round, bumpy foam pad designed for correcting or polishing. Slide this pad onto the base of your polisher to secure it in place. Check the user manual for your polisher if you aren't sure how to add a new pad. Foam pads help to polish the surface without causing abrasions. Use a polishing cloth if you're buffing the lacquer by hand. Shop online or in a car supply shop for a special polishing cloth. Don't use a microfiber cloth for your polishing projects, as the fibers may scratch the surface of your lacquer. Instead, purchase a smooth, soft towel or cloth that's specifically designed for polishing work. Spread a pea-sized amount of correcting polish on the lacquer. Add the polish to the specific area or corner that you plan on polishing. If you're buffing a large surface, you can use extra polish as needed for other sections of lacquer. If you're using a polisher, feel free to apply the polish directly to the foam pad. You can purchase polish online or at a hardware or home improvement store. Ask a store associate for help if you need specific recommendations for a project. Rub the polish into the lacquer using slow, careful motions. If you're using a polishing cloth, take a small section of the cloth and rub over the polish carefully. Move it in slow, circular motions to spread the polish and buff the surface. If you're using a mechanical polisher, set the tool to a relatively slow speed, e.g., machine speed 4, and move it in vertical or horizontal lines to spread the polish. Wipe down the surface with a bare polishing cloth. Rub the surface in even, circular motions, smoothing out any excess polish into the lacquer. Continue buffing the surface until it looks reflective and smooth. Scoop a grape-sized amount of paste wax onto a lint-free cloth. Use your hands to squeeze the wax so it can soften and apply more easily to the car. Depending on the size of your vehicle, you may need to use more or less wax to cover your desired surface. Rub the wax into the lacquered surface. Move the cloth in straight or circular motions depending on what you prefer. Work in small sections at a time, making your way from one side of the surface to the other. If the wax begins to dry, rub in a new layer of wax to soften the original. It doesn't matter how you rub the wax as long as you're consistent. Use a lid-free cloth to wipe away any leftover wax. Work in small sections, wiping in either straight or circular motions to pick up the excess. Go from one side to the other so you can keep track of the area that you've wiped. Polish the surface with a clean buffing cloth. Take a new cloth and rub over the waxed lacquer of your car. Work in straight or circular motions, just make sure you're being consistent so the surface looks even and smooth.